A man sits in a heap of ashes outside the city gate. His skin is covered in open sores from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. He has scraped a piece of broken pottery across his body, trying to get relief from the itching that will not stop. His wife has just told him to curse God and die. His children, all 10 of them, are buried. His wealth is gone. His name, once spoken with reverence across the entire region, is now whispered with pity. And he does not understand why. He has not committed any great sin. He has not turned away from God. In fact, the very book that records his story opens by declaring that he was the most righteous man on the face of the earth. And that is exactly why this happened. The book of Job is one of the oldest texts in the entire Bible. Many scholars believe it was written before Genesis was even compiled into its final form, possibly during the time of the patriarchs. Somewhere around 2000 to 1500 BC, there is no mention of Moses, no Israel, no Sinai, no temple. Just a man in a land called Uz, wrestling with the question that every human being eventually has to answer. Why do good people suffer? But here is what most people miss when they read this book. The story is not really about why bad things happen. It is about something much deeper, much harder, and much more personal. It is about whether you can love God when there is nothing left to gain from it. That is the wager. That is the entire spine of this book. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Let me set the scene because the world Job lived in matters. The opening verses tell us he lived in the land of Uz, a region most likely located east of Israel, possibly in modern-day Jordan or northern Arabia. He was, in the language of Job 1:3, the greatest of all the people of the East. He owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and a household so large the text simply describes it as very great. He had 10 children, 7 sons and 3 daughters. The numbers in this story are not random. 7 and 3 are numbers of completeness in Hebrew literature. Job's life was complete. His blessings were total. His standing was unmatched. And then comes verse 1, which is the verse the entire book hangs on. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright, and one who feared God and shunned evil. That word blameless in Hebrew is tam, and tam does not mean sinless. It means whole, complete, having integrity. It is the same word used to describe a sacrificial animal that has no defects, fit for the altar. Job was not perfect, but he was undivided. There was no gap between what he believed and how he lived. And that is what makes him interesting to heaven. Now, the camera shifts. And this is where the book takes a turn that has shocked readers for thousands of years. Job 1:6 says, "Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them." Suddenly, we are not on earth anymore, we are in a heavenly courtroom. The sons of God, a phrase that in Hebrew refers to angelic beings, are gathered before the throne, and among them stands a figure called in Hebrew Hasatan. The definite article matters. It is not a personal name yet. It is a title. The accuser, the adversary, the prosecuting attorney, and God speaks first. He does not wait to be questioned. He brings up Job himself. "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil?" Read that again, slowly. God is bragging on Job. The accuser had not even mentioned him. God brings him forward as Exhibit A. And the accuser's response is one of the sharpest accusations ever leveled against a human being. Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him, around his household, and around all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But now stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. There is the wager. There is the whole question. The accuser is not just attacking Job, he is attacking the very nature of worship itself. He is saying that nobody really loves God. People only obey God because they get something out of it. Take away the rewards, and the religion collapses. Strip away the hedge, and you will see what is really underneath. That is the accusation. And God's response is staggering. Behold, all that he has is in your power. Only do not lay a hand on his person. God hands his servant over to the prosecution, not because God is cruel, but because something larger than Job's comfort is on the line. The honor of God himself is being questioned, whether love can exist in a universe without payment. And now the lights come up on earth again, and Job has no idea what just happened. 4 messengers arrive in rapid succession. The Hebrew text emphasizes the speed by repeating the same phrase 4 times. While he was still speaking, another came. The Sabeans raided the oxen and donkeys and killed the servants. Fire fell from the sky and burned up the sheep and the shepherds. The Chaldeans took the camels and killed those servants too. And then a wind came across the desert and collapsed the house where his children were eating, and they were all dead. In a single afternoon, Job lost everything except his wife and his life. And then comes one of the most remarkable verses in the entire Bible. Then Job arose, tore his robe, and shaved his head. And he fell to the ground and worshipped. And he said, Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He worshipped. With 10 fresh graves and an empty barn, he worshipped. Round 1 of the wager goes to God. But the accuser is not finished. Job 2 opens with a second courtroom scene. The angels gather again. The accuser shows up again. And God speaks first again, this time with a phrase that hits like a hammer. He still holds fast to his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without cause. The Hebrew is hinnom. It means freely, gratuitously, for no reason. God himself acknowledges that what happened to Job was not punishment for sin, it was something else entirely. The accuser doubles down, skin for skin. Yes, all that a man has he will give for his life, but stretch out your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will surely curse you to your face. Now the attack moves to Job's body. Job 2:7 says he was struck with painful boils from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. The Hebrew word here is shechin, a term used elsewhere for severe skin disease, possibly something like ulcerated lesions or infected sores covering every inch of his body. He sat in ashes, scraping himself with a piece of broken pottery, because there was no relief. And then his wife speaks, and the church has been hard on her for thousands of years. But pause and feel what she has just lost. 10 children, her home, her future, her standing, and now her husband is dying in front of her by inches. Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die. Job's answer is gentle and devastating. You speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity? That word adversity in Hebrew is ra. It is the same word translated as evil. Job is asking the question every sufferer eventually asks. If we receive blessing from God's hand, why should we be surprised when something else comes from that same hand? Round 2 also goes to God. But Job is not done suffering. 3 of his friends hear what has happened and travel from their countries to come and comfort him: Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. When they arrive, they barely recognize him. The text says they wept, tore their robes, and threw dust on their heads. And then they did the most loving thing they would do in the entire book. So they sat down with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his grief was very great. Job 2:13, 7 days of silence, just presence. No advice, no theology, no explanations. If they had stopped there, they would have been heroes. But they did not stop there, because on day 8, somebody opened their mouth. Job speaks first, and what comes out of him is the cry of a man who has been holding his breath for a week. Chapter 3 is one of the rawest pieces of poetry in the entire Bible. He does not curse God, but he curses the day he was born. May the day perish on which I was born, and the night in which it was said, a male child is conceived. May that day be darkness. Job 3:3-4. He wishes he had been stillborn. He asks why light is given to those who suffer. He asks why life is given to the bitter of soul. He does not want to die exactly. He wants to never have existed. This is what real suffering sounds like. The Bible does not sanitize it. And then the friends start to talk. And from chapter 4 to chapter 31, the book becomes a series of long speeches, 3 rounds of conversation, each friend taking a turn, Job responding to each one. The friends are not stupid men. They are educated, religious, articulate, and their argument boils down to one core conviction: God is just. The righteous prosper. The wicked suffer. Therefore, if you are suffering this much, you must have sinned this much. Confess, repent, and the blessing will return. Eliphaz appeals to mystical experience. He claims to have had a vision in the night that confirmed his theology. Bildad appeals to tradition. He says the wisdom of the ancestors agrees with him. Zophar appeals to the obvious. He says Job is being treated more leniently than he deserves. And Job pushes back against all of them. He insists he has not committed any sin worthy of this. He demands an audience with God himself. He wants to argue his case in court. He swings between despair and defiance, between believing God has become his enemy and believing God is still his only hope. And right in the middle of his agony, he speaks one of the most stunning lines of faith ever recorded. Job 19:25-27. For I know that my Redeemer lives, and he shall stand at last on the earth. And after my skin is destroyed, this I know, that in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself, and my eyes shall behold, and not another. How my heart yearns within me. That word Redeemer in Hebrew is goal. It refers to a kinsman redeemer, the closest relative whose duty was to buy back property, free a slave from bondage, or avenge a death in the family. Job, sitting in ashes with no possessions and no future, declares that somewhere out there is a kinsman who will buy him back. He does not fully understand who that Redeemer is, but the New Testament writers will eventually fill in that name with letters of fire. The dialogues finally exhaust themselves. The 3 friends fall silent because, in the words of Job 32:1, Job was righteous in his own eyes. They have nothing left to say. And then a young man named Elihu speaks up. He has been listening the whole time. He is angry at the friends because they accused Job without proving anything. And he is angry at Job because he justified himself rather than God. Elihu's speeches in chapters 32 to 37 do something the others did not. He suggests that suffering is not always punishment. Sometimes it is instruction. Sometimes God uses pain to draw a person closer, to refine them, to keep them from a worse fate. Job 33:19 says, "Man is also chastened with pain on his bed." Elihu does not have all the answers, but he sets the stage for the voice that finally arrives. Because in chapter 38, after 37 chapters of human speculation, the heavens crack open. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, "Who is this who darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Now prepare yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me." For 4 chapters, God speaks, and he does not answer a single one of Job's questions. Instead, he asks Job questions. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Have you commanded the morning since your days began? Do you know where light dwells? Can you bind the cluster of the Pleiades or loose the belt of Orion? Can you send out lightning bolts that they may go and say to you, "Here we are"? Have you entered the springs of the sea? Have you walked in search of the depths? Question after question after question. The Hebrew structure is overwhelming on purpose. God is not bullying Job. He's doing something far more loving. He's showing Job that the universe is bigger than his suffering, that there are mysteries operating at scales he cannot see, that the same God who hung the stars and feeds the lions and watches the wild donkey roam free is intimately involved in everything that happens, including this. God describes creatures Job has never seen, the wild ox that cannot be tamed, the ostrich that abandons her eggs but outruns the horse, the hawk that soars by wisdom Job did not give it, and then 2 creatures that scholars still debate: Behemoth, a massive land creature, and Leviathan, a sea creature so terrifying that no human can stand against it. The point is not zoology. The point is sovereignty. There are forces in this world that Job cannot control, cannot understand, cannot defeat, and every single one of them answers to the voice currently speaking from the whirlwind, and here is what most people walk right past. God never tells Job about the wager. He never explains the heavenly courtroom. He never says, "There was a meeting between me and the accuser, and you were the test case." Job dies without ever knowing why all of this happened. Only the reader knows. Only we, sitting outside the story, see the full picture. And that is one of the most important lessons this book teaches. You may never get the explanation you are asking for. The reasons may be playing out at a level you cannot access. And God is not obligated to show you the script. He is only obligated to be who he is. Job's response in chapter 42 is one of the most beautiful surrenders in the Bible. I know that you can do everything, and that no purpose of yours can be withheld from you. I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes. That phrase, "I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you," is the heart of the whole book. Job's theology was always correct. He believed in God, he worshipped God, he served God, but he had only heard about God. Now, after losing everything and meeting God in the whirlwind, he sees him. Sometimes the only way to see God is to lose everything else that was blocking your view. Then the story turns. God speaks to the 3 friends and rebukes them. He says they have not spoken what is right about him, as Job has. That is a remarkable verdict because Job said some difficult things, but Job said them honestly, while wrestling with God. The friends spoke piously, but they spoke falsely. God prefers honest wrestling to dishonest religion, and then the restoration comes. Job 42:10 says the Lord restored Job's losses when he prayed for his friends. Indeed, the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before, twice as much, 14,000 sheep instead of 7,000, 6,000 camels instead of 3,000, 1,000 yoke of oxen instead of 500, and 10 more children, 7 sons and 3 daughters. Notice something about the children. The animals were doubled, but the children were not. Why? Because the first 10 children were not lost forever. They were waiting. Job had 10 children on earth and 10 in eternity, 20 in total. The math of resurrection is different from the math of livestock. The book ends with Job living another 140 years, seeing 4 generations of his descendants, and dying old and full of days. But here is the question we have to sit with. Was the restoration the point of the book? Did the story exist so that we would learn that if we hold on, God will eventually give us back twice as much? No, that misses everything. The point of the book is what happened in the silence between the second courtroom scene and the final restoration. The point is that Job loved God in the ashes. He held on when the hedge was gone, when the rewards were stripped away, when his body was breaking and his friends were accusing and his own heart was screaming. He held on, and in doing so, he answered the accusation. He proved that worship can exist without reward, that love for God is not a transaction, that a human being can stand in the dust with nothing in his hands and still say, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust him." Job 13:15. So let us take a breath and look at where we have been. The book of Job is not a treatise on suffering. It is a courtroom drama with cosmic stakes. The accusation was not just about Job. It was about every person who has ever loved God. The question was whether faith could survive without payment, and the answer, written in the ashes of one man's grief, was yes. So what does this story say to you sitting where you are right now? First, your suffering may not be punishment. The friends were certain that Job's pain was proof of his sin. They were wrong. Sometimes pain is not discipline. Sometimes it is not consequence. Sometimes it is a battle you cannot see being fought in places you cannot reach. And the most spiritual thing you can do in those moments is refuse to accept the false explanations of people who think they know what God is doing. Second, God is more interested in your trust than your understanding. Job never got the why. He got something better. He got the who. He got God himself in the whirlwind. And it was enough. If you are waiting for an explanation before you will worship, you may wait forever. The invitation is to worship in the not knowing. Third, the kinsman redeemer that Job longed for has a name. Job cried out from the ash heap that he knew his Redeemer lived. He did not know who that Redeemer would be. We do. The one who would stand on the earth in the latter days, the one who would give Job eyes to see God, the one who would buy back what was lost. His name is Jesus. And every tear Job cried, every sore he scraped, every silent night he endured was being witnessed by the very Redeemer who would one day take all of it onto himself on a cross. A man sits in a heap of ashes outside the city gate. His skin is broken, his children are gone, his friends have failed him, and he does not know why, but heaven knows. And one day, in a whirlwind, the voice that hung the stars will speak to him by name, and it will be enough. The book of Job is one of the oldest books in the Bible, and it asks the question that has not gotten any easier in 4,000 years. But the answer is still the same. There is a God who sees you in the ashes. There is a Redeemer who lives. And there is a story being told over your life that is bigger than the chapter you are currently in. If this opened something up for you, the biggest thing you can do is subscribe, leave a comment, even one word, and share this with someone who is sitting in their own ash heap right now and needs to know they are not forgotten. We depend on you to spread the word. Please keep us in your prayers. God bless you.